All right, guys, this is our fourth screencast, I believe. Maybe off on that, but that's okay. Today we're going to be talking about exploration and the 16th century society. So this is on the new monarchs and the extension of new monarchs. Last time we had a screencast by Mr. Procopio, and he just spoke about the new monarchs, which you recently had a test on. But we are now going to talk a little bit more as after they centralized power, and obviously they're able to control, again, look at my hand, centralization. They're able to control the boundaries within their given country. Now they have the economic and political power, the organization to not only just control their country inside, but start trying to go to other places and control things outside. So this is where we're going to be talking about in exploration. I'm going to go ahead and highlight it right here. We're going to be talking about the Christopher Columbus going over to the Americas. We're going to talk about Vasco da Gama and the explorers going around the Cape of Good Hope and basically what we call circumnavigating the world, which is Magellan, who finally linked all of these routes together. A bigger idea, again, we'll talk about this probably in a second, but just again to give you more context, as people began moving to other places like the Americas, not only did they move there and have new social experiences like, hey, what do we do with these people with Native Americans? Hey, we need more laborers. Should we get some slaves from a place called Africa? But in addition to that, to the social changes that were happening in what we call the colonies, the places where the Europeans went to, like the Americas, like in Africa, like in India, but also they were starting to bring goods back home. And this created a huge social change. I mean, imagine a world before Walmart. And basically, what the exploration did is started turning Europe into a major Walmart. Everybody could go there from things from Africa, India, Asia, and the Americas. And so this will increase the strength of Europe. It will increase the economic prosperity of Europe. And a huge reason, actually, why they began controlling a lot of the world begins here. Also, you could kind of link this, if you want to guns, germs, and steel. In the geography class. If you didn't take that, you might want to talk to, if you didn't do that last year in your geography class, you might want to talk to Mr. Procopio a little bit. Oh my goodness. And I apologize for that. There is a little bit of a canceling, so a little auto update. So hopefully we'll be okay. I am not going to edit this out because I'm already too far in, so deal with it. All right. So let's move on. Let's get to the notes. So exploration in 16th century society. Oh, also I've reposted these notes on the TAC website. So you should look right above right now. It should say notes, and I reposted those so that you can have easy download and reference. All right, so scrolling down, this is all about the new monarchs, which you should already have known. And here we go. So we're going to begin with what's called the Commercial Revolution. So the Commercial Revolution, guys, is kind of like the baby step before the exploration. Obviously, we need to have some money to finance these explorers. These explorers are going out into the ocean. They may never return. They need very expensive ships. They need food and rations for their people. And also, Christopher Columbus and all these people are not taking it for a risk, man. They expect to get paid. So you have to have some wealth. You have to have some money. You have to have some things kind of like banks in your country for this type of exploration happen, or else it's just random people doing random things. And I guarantee, because of superstition and because of the maybe lack of knowledge of the world, not a lot of people would have risked just their lives to go explore. They wanted some kind of financial incentive because they knew they were pretty much risking their lives. So with that being said, let's talk about some things that are happening. Again, look at this year. I mean, 1500, 1700, and we even talk about the Middle Ages here. We're talking about things that are happening well before exploration that allows exploration to happen. Big thing is population growth. Why is that a good thing? There are more consumers. What are consumers? People who buy things. So if you have more people and they're buying more things, that means you're becoming richer as a company, as a business. And in fact, this is still true today. Europe and Japan and a lot of different countries that have been very strong for a long time are actually having smaller populations. And the problem is you have all of these older people who are in business, but you don't have younger people to buy the things. And so if you can imagine, if you have smaller populations later, you don't have as many buyers, any consumers, or as many customers. If you don't have as many customers, your businesses aren't going to do so well. So that's why people in America love a lot of Americans who say we need to have a strong economy would love immigration. They would love the fact that we are having more children, maybe more than 2 or 3 children per couple, so that we can continue to increase the population. So the idea of population growth is the idea that we have now more customers or consumers. And if we have more customers, we make more money. All right. Due to the population growth, there was a price revolution and there was an increase in food prices. If you have an increase in food prices and an increase in prices in general, obviously your businesses are making more money. Yeah, sure, the customers might not be making as much money because they are giving more money, but you as a business are making more money. Also, in 1492, we know 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. If you look at this time, it says 1500. They started importing a lot of gold and silver. Now, if you bring in a lot of gold and silver, that means the value of it is going down. Just a little comparison. The best way to explain this is maybe baseball cards. Baseball cards have these things called rookie cards, or I know some of you guys play Magic or Pokemon or whatever, but you guys know that there's always very special cards that are very rare. And if they're very rare, they're very valuable. Well, imagine if you don't have, imagine if you have a lot of those and a lot of these cards, but these cards aren't rare. Well, if they're not rare, that means there's lots of them. There's a lot of different versions of them, like regular baseball cards or the regular Pokemon cards or the regular Magic cards, not that one special one. And so therefore, it's not as valuable. So if we have more gold and silver, that means the value of gold and silver, because there's so much more of it to go around, is not more valuable, it's less valuable. I hope you understand that. That's, again, this basic idea that you should probably start to understand now called supply and demand. That means if there's more supply and more, and let's say less, and more demand of something, the price usually goes up. If there's a lot of supply but the demand's kind of low, this price usually goes down. So a couple of kind of ideas in there, and here you can see the word supply pop up. I mean, hey, if you have more goods, then you probably want to increase the prices to make more money off of that. This makes sense. Obviously, countries that are unifying like Spain, like France, England has just made a big step towards that with Henry VIII. They want to not increase their political power, but economic power. Also, the idea of capitalism, the idea that I have extra money and I'm going to put that extra money, instead of putting it under my sofa, I might invest that in creating an own business to make more money off of that. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, but we have this new word called the bourgeoisie. And if you're saying, wow, that sounds French, you're absolutely correct. And that's a French word for middle class. So we began creating a middle class where instead of just being super poor, they actually have enough money to create more businesses and newer businesses. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. Like I said earlier, one very important thing is banking. You have to have banks to collect money. You need to have banks to get money from the rich so that you can go to the poor. You give it to the poor usually in form of loans so that you can make interest, and usually the rich make even more money off of that interest as well. So you got to have this banking because you need money to explore, and that's exactly what they did. So we have banking here. Here's a pretty funny thing. The Fuggers in Germany. Yes, there's a father Fugger, brother Fugger, and actually a mother Fugger. So that's kind of our little joke. Hope you laughed on that. We got the Medicis. We already talked about them. Antwerp, again, is what we call a lowland country. And here's a big one, Amsterdam. You might want to know about this. We're going to come back to Amsterdam. Amsterdam is interesting because they're promoting banking and religious toleration during this time of the Protestant Reformation. So a lot of people are moving there, not only for the economic opportunities, but also for religious safety. And if you guys noticed, America's pretty strong because we allow different people to come to our country, no matter what your religion is. And that's what kind of Amsterdam was doing. It was kind of like the baby America saying, hey, if you have problems and you're being persecuted in your country, come to Amsterdam. No big deal. We'll take care of you. So that is a kind of know about Amsterdam. We're going to talk about them a little bit more, especially after Wars of Religion, because they become a very strong power because of their banking and religious toleration background. The Hanseatic League is a German states. They're coming together. They're basically trying to create a common country based off of money. Remember that they're in the Holy Roman Empire, so the political group is the Holy Roman Empire, but this Hanseatic League was like a group saying, hey, instead of you having different forms of money, you different forms of money, you have different goods, let's agree, let's have the same amount of money and same goods so that we can trade easier. Big one coming up, East India Company. And notice that the East India Company is kind of like the first McDonald's. It goes all over the world. There's going to be a British East India Company. There's going to be a Dutch East India Company. Later, there's going to be a French East India Company. Obviously, its job was to send ships to East India. So And you need and you needed these companies to supported by the state government. So again, starting to see that if you don't have a strong government, if you don't have a strong banking system, you probably weren't able to go out and explore in the world. And that's why we're going to look at Spain, we're going to look at England as the major countries. Italy, which has been quite strong, is going to fall off because if you look at where Italy is, it's in the Mediterranean, and right now the trade is going to start opening in the Atlantic. We also have something called the joint stock companies. If you've ever heard of the stock exchange, that's exactly how this works. I have extra money, and so I give money to a person. That person says, all right, for that money, you get 1/5 of the company. And let's say the company does really, really well, well, then I get 1/5 of the profits or the money that they make. So joint stock companies started happening, and the stock markets emerged. Again, we're going to talk about this a little bit more. The first enclosure movement, this is basically the idea that in England, people started basically taking their excess wool and started making their own clothes at home. And also they started closing off their land. The enclosure movement is actually the closing off of their lands from public land to private land. So back in the day in England, they would have all this grazing land where a sheep, a cattle, a horse, anybody could go out there and go eat it. Unfortunately, if you're growing crops, you don't want sheep coming over and trampling or horses or cows to ruin your crops. So there was a major problem. And in England had this idea of saying, hey, instead of having all this land out there, why don't we make private land so that you have fences enclosed to close off your land in fences so that this area would be for sheep and this space it would be for crops. Why was that such a crazy idea? Well, the idea of making things from public to private, as you guys know, think of public parks versus private parks. Think of public schools versus private schools. Private schools tend to be just private things tend to be treated a little bit better because the people who own them really take pride in them. So that was a big movement towards there. And obviously that means they had excess money. You have excess money, you're going to invest it. Maybe you're going to put it in a bank. And that's why England perhaps becomes such great explorers. The putting out system, again, we'll talk about this later. I'm going to kind of fly through this. Kind of a couple ideas is mercantilism. We're going to be talking about later, but this is a good idea, so I'll pause here and talk about this. So mercantilism is the idea that I should make the most amount of money for my country as much as possible. So what would you do? You want people to buy, let's say I'm French, I want people to buy French things. I don't want people to buy English things or Spanish things. I want people to buy French things. That way my country becomes wealthy. I don't want my money going to Spain. I don't want my money to go to England. So what you want to do is you wanted to basically export. That means have French things go to other countries more than import, rather than having like stuff from England and Spain go into France. That was the idea, so that you can make more money. There's also the idea of bullionism, which is this, and, they don't have credit cards at this time. They don't have paper money. Really, they do have paper money, but it's backed by gold and silver. So we'll talk about this later. We're on currently a credit system. This is why we can go into debt and make as much money as we possibly want, because we're not controlled by a certain level of gold. Back then, they didn't have a credit system, so they said this: you were as wealthy as how much gold and silver you had. So you want to be wealthy, get as much gold and silver as possible. How do you get all this gold and silver? Well, dude, you take things from other countries. How do you take the gold and silver from other countries? You make them buy your stuff. So I'm French. Here's some French bread. Here's some French cheese. Now you give me gold and silver. Oh, my country just became stronger. So hopefully this gives you an idea of mercantilism. This is a major idea. I cannot think that this would not be on the test. It's just too important. This is the type of economic system that countries will have for the next about 300 years, up until about the 1850s, when we start getting ideas of capitalism in. All right. I've kind of talked about the price revolution. Let's talk about, I guess, the significance real quick. I'm not going to go into the price revolution, but I'll talk about this. So we're going from these peasants who are only working on the land and only making crops and food to sell, to suddenly ideas of towns with banks and businesses. And these towns are not making food because outside of the town would be making the food, bringing it in, and the townsmen would give them clothes or boots or leather works or blacksmithing, metal, stuff like that. Western Europe is going to do well. It's kind of your kind of idea of notes. Serfdom or peasantry is really going to get rid of, is going to be lost in Western Europe, and Eastern Europe is going to be strong. So Russia, Poland, even parts of the Holy Roman Empire are going to have a lot of serfs for a long time, whereas in Western Europe, like in France and England specifically, they're going to be getting rid of their serfdom. They're going to turn these guys into what we call the working poor, rather than simply kind of like a peasant slash slave. The emergence of powerful nation states, wealth could be taxed. We talked about one of the ideas of the new monarchs was taxation to make more money. And now that we have this money, we can now use this for exploration. So I hope you're kind of linking all of these ideas together. Price revolution, once again, you might want to read this over. I would take a few notes, but I'm going to talk about that later. But really, we want to get to the age of exploration here. So again, here you have again the bourgeoisie, which is that middle class. These poor people that are actually becoming middle class. Look at, they're in Italy, they're in France, they're in England. Again, the idea that they're in Western Europe, not so much in Eastern Europe. All right. Causes for exploration. I learned this when I was an AP European history student. Yes, I took this class. No, I did not pass. I got a 2 on the test, which I feel horrible about. But I remember this. They said God, glory, and gold. That was the primary info. Is what God? Well, you had to Christianize people. You had to turn them Catholic specifically. Glory. I wanted to be known as the explorer that found America. And gold, well, that was a big reason why they went. They kept on hearing about gold, riches, and spices. So they said, hey, let's go over there and I'll make us rich. As you said earlier, the new monarchs create what we call these controlled nation states. Again, Portugal and Spain wanted to find ways that they didn't have to deal with Italy and also the Middle East. So probably good that I get out of this for a second, which I am. And let me go to a really quick map for you guys so that I can show you. So I'll put Europe map. So let me go ahead and just make this big for you so you can see it. Let's go a little faster. All right, cool. So here's Europe, guys. Here's Europe. But what was happening is, remember that Italy, the reason why it was so strong and during the Renaissance is because everybody would take their stuff this way, stop here, and basically Italy would go all over. Italy would trade it with the rest of Europe. What Spain and Portugal are doing over here is they're going, is there a way that we can travel all the way down here around Africa and all the way over here? Imagine, again, this is India. I guess we need a world map, so let me do that instead. World map. I guess we're no longer about Europe, it's about the entire world. So click on this guy. So here we go. So really, all right, my bad. Sorry, guys. Give me one more sec. Really. Maybe it's just that the computers are slow. Too many kids on Chromebooks. Anyways, okay, cool, a little bit better. So anyways, remember that there was a lot of spices, silvers. I mean, if you think of Indian food, you think of curries. I mean, this stuff was like insane and was seen as like a luxury for Europeans. So this stuff would go here. It'd go through the Middle East where they would trade it with the Italians, and the Italians would basically have all of Europe. Well, Spain and Portugal in this way, they say, well, how can we become rich like Italy? I know. Instead of dealing with these Italians, and let's cut out the middleman and the Middle Easterners. Let's find a way that we can go all the way down here, go all the way up to here, and trade it all the way back. And now we'll be the traders. We'll be the store. We'll be the Walmart for Europe, and basically we'll make all the money. So I hope that kind of makes sense on why Italy got kind of canceled out. Also, look at Italy. It has no access to all these oceans. It's stuck in the Mediterranean. So its trade's going to be locally the Mediterranean. And at this time, as more and more nations like Spain, like France, like England, at certain levels, even Germany and Amsterdam for sure, as they go this way, as they go this way, as they go this way, notice I'm never putting this in the Mediterranean. It's always in the Atlantic, the Indian, and even the Pacific Ocean. So this area of the world becomes less and less important for trade, and these oceans, these huge oceans that are linking all these continents, all of these ideas, those are going to be the importance of our trade. So this is kind of a big reason why Italy is going to start losing its power, losing its economic power. We're not going to be talking about them nearly as much as we're going to be talking about these countries right here. All right, guys. So let's go back to our notes. So there's that idea about Italy, impact, you can read that. Cartography is study of maps. Obviously, you need maps to feel safe that where you're going. Technological advances, definitely see this all the time. Compasses is important. They started creating ideas about latitude and longitude, which you learned last year. The ships, they had different sails, they had rope riggings. This made them to go faster, stronger. Also, they had these rudders now that you could put in that could actually have you go even though this is done by wind, you could actually start sailing into the wind. If you want to look at my hand, they kind of, if the wind's going this way, they kind of do like a zigzag motion. So it's nothing you need to know. But anyways, all these technological advances just made it much easier for ships to go much faster and much longer than they had previously. All right, so let's get to the main dudes. The first country, we have Portugal. That shouldn't be a surprise. It's on the Atlantic Ocean. Big guy, Prince Henry the Navigator. He is basically the money man. And look at this. I mean, 1394, guys. I mean, this is Black Plague time. So I know that in this class, you kind of think like the Black Death happened and it's gone. And then Martin Luther showed, I mean, the Renaissance happened and then it's gone. And then Martin Luther showed up and then he's gone. And then we're exploring. Now, all of these things are kind of happening at the same time. The Black Death, Renaissance humanism, and these explorations are all happening at the same time. So it's kind of confusing because this class you have to go to multiple countries and multiple ideas, and they're all happening at the same time. Whereas one country like the United States, we have to start here and we just talk about it together. But we're not studying just one country, we're studying European history. So that's where it gets a little bit confusing at times, but I'm sure you're going to get it, and hopefully the screencast will help you out. So Bartolomé Diaz is the first guy that goes around Africa. Vasco da Gama, he follows Diaz's route and goes all the way to India. Now we don't need Italy anymore. And so now Portugal will be very strong, not the Italians. Amerigo Vespucci, hey, America. Yeah, he's the first European that went to the New World, and supposedly America is named after him. Brazil. Portugal's major colony in the New World. We will talk about this. I don't see it here, but there is a treaty called the Treaty of Tordesillas, and the Pope actually helps Portugal and Spain stop a major war. And they say, okay, you guys are going to fight in South America, so we're going to draw a line. And I'm acting like I'm drawing a line. We're going to draw a line between South America. If you're this way, you're going to be Portuguese. If this way, you're part of Spain. And this is why Brazil speaks Portuguese, because that's where the line was. So, anyways, Brazil's Portugal's major colony. It's going to do a lot of sugar. It's going to import a lot of slaves. If you know Brazilians, you might see that there are a lot of African-American features to them, and that's because of that. All right, here's the main dude, Christopher Columbus. What's funny is, he thought he was in the Indies or India. He was about, I don't know, 7,000 miles off, so probably not the best explorer. But anyways, that's him. We also have this guy, De las Casas. He is a former conquistador. Conquistador in Spanish means conqueror. So these are the people that came over and started breaking things and started capturing people. But he kind of turns into more of a priest, and he writes a book, and that's where he says, man, the way that we're treating the Native Americans by just basically killing them and stealing their stuff is probably not appropriate. So it's pretty interesting. So here's all of that. I guess he talks about the Black legend where Spain was accused of using Christianity for killing countless natives. And we have that. Oh, hey, here's the Treaty of Tordesillas I told you about. So again, here's that New World that was divided by Spain because of Pope Leo. He was scared that Catholics would start killing Catholics. And the New World said, dude, let's not do that, man. Let's draw a line and let's have a little peace. And so that's what he did in the Treaty of Tordesillas. I call it the Treaty of Tortillas. I don't know, it's kind of a cool way to remember it because look at these countries, Portugal and Spain, both of them are Spanish countries. They helped create the tortilla. There's a thing called a Spanish tortilla that's made out of egg that they use in Spain. No, it's not made out of corn or flour. It's made out of egg. But anyways, kind of a cool way to remember that, the Treaty of Tortillas. Hey, we got Balboa Park. That's what it's named after. So discovering of the Pacific Ocean. He crossed the isthmus by land and then rebuilt his boat again on the other side and then started doing it. Magellan was a guy, the first guy to go around the entire world. And here are probably the most famous one. Hernan Cortez, he's the one that took over the Aztecs, in Mexico. And then Francisco Pizarro, he's the one that took out the Incans in Peru. So those are kind of the areas. So what are some of the effects? Once again, you're seeing that Spain and Portugal are the ones that seem to be doing most of the work. So because of that, they go into what's called the Golden Age. They're taking over the most amount of land. And because of that, check this out, they're finding the most amount of silver and gold. And so therefore, they are becoming very, very, very rich. Something to know that's kind of interesting, this kind of popped up recently with our father Junipero Serra becoming a saint. If you hadn't noticed that happened about 3 days ago. Well, today's date, in case we know in the future, today's date is Friday, September 25th, 2015. So a couple days ago, a saint was created who was a friar or a missionary here in California, and he developed all the mission systems. What was interesting is there was a system that they created called Encomienda, and it was the idea that if you took over land, you were supposed to take care of the people. And how did you take care of the people? Well, you provided them food, shelter, and Christianity. And their job was to work for you. And you're saying, well, that's an interesting thing. It kind of sounds like slavery. And that's basically what the Encomienda system turned into. It turned into a slave system of capturing American Indians and making them work for the missionaries and the conquistadors that came after. We get a new word, and we talked about the social changes. A mestizo, which is a Spaniard with an American Indian. We would probably call those mestizos Mexicans today, to give you a heads up. So anyways, we have Creoles, and these are Spaniards born in the New World to Spanish parents. So both your parents were Spanish, not a Spanish and an Indian, a mix or a mestizo. A Creole would be two Spanish parents from Spain who would have a Spanish daughter or son. Okay? This is going to be called Old Imperialism because we're going to talk about the New Imperialism. The New Imperialism is going to happen in the 1800s. Once again, this is like the 1450s to 1600s. But basically, they're staying at the coast this whole time. And their job is to basically take control of the people that live there, whether it be the Africans, whether it be the Indians of North America, South America, or the Caribbean, or the Indians of India, quite honestly. That's the kind of what they're going to want to do. They're going to want to use this place to trade and as a place to stop. They're not going to try to make these into countries yet. They're just basically using it as a stop to gather people and things. So that's pretty much all that. You can look at these. Again, here's that Dutch East India Company again, and here's that Dutch Republic, aka the Netherlands. Remember that the capital city in the Netherlands is Amsterdam. We've talked about the family. We've talked about Amsterdam being a major area. So I would take a note on this. France and England did get involved, as you can see here. We got Jacques Cartier, and also we got in England, I believe it's John Cabot. Yep, there he is. John Cabot right there. So we got England going in there. Slave trade, we already know about the slave trade. But let's go more now into, you guys should review these, and you should take a couple notes. I know I'm kind of flying through these, but just a couple of notes. I really want to talk about the effects. So now that we know how people were able to start exploration, and we know some of the explorers, well, now what were the effects? Again, the how did they do this was the creation of a nation state, a great banking system, a centralized country, a centralized political system. We talked about the explorers, so let's now talk about the effect. So the big thing is called the Columbian Exchange. The Columbian Exchange is also known as the Triangle Trade. So you might want to write that down over here, the Triangle Trade. The reason why it's called the Triangle Trade, and again, you might want to look at my hands, is there was a triangle formed, basically. It kind of actually, let's see, for you, it'd kind of be like this, between Europe, Africa, and the Americas. So Europe would send usually guns and people down to Africa, and then they would steal the African people to go over to America, and then in America would provide like potatoes and tomatoes and corn. These are all things that had not actually existed. I mean, again, imagine Italy in the year 1450 not really having a thing called tomatoes. You don't have tomato sauce, you don't have pizza, you don't have pasta. So kind of an interesting world that would have been Italian at that time and what we think about Italian food. So this Columbian Exchange we know has had profound effects. I mean, the reason why we think of Italian food of being pasta with tomato sauce and pizza with tomato sauce is because of the Columbian Exchange. If this never happened, they would never had those goods. So hopefully you're starting to see some of the effects. They're getting more things, they're moving people, and those are all going to have social effects or effects on the greater people. So that's that one. As you can see, for the Europeans, it improved the diet, increased the wealth, and it had them strong. For the American Indians, they died. Greed, violence, ruthlessness, and horrible disease would attack them, which gets to our next thing, disease. There are two of them that you want to know. First of all, the American Indians, they died mainly of smallpox. About 90% of the people would die, as it says here. However, the Europeans were not victim of disease either. I mean, they brought back a sexually contracted disease called syphilis. And this was transmitted to Europeans when they would probably have sexual affairs and relationships with the American Indians. And when they went back home to Europe, they probably would continue those sexual relationships with Europeans and they would spread it. So there was a huge spread. Another effect is the diet. Again, I talked about the idea of the tomato being important. Probably the most important was the potato. They didn't have that, and this is a very stable crop. It's very easy to grow, and it's easy to grow in different climates and different situations. So a lot of Europeans, a lot of European countries, some that are wet, some that are dry, some that are green, some that don't have much vegetation, are going to adopt the potato, and it's going to become a strong food source for them. Plants, wheat, sugar, coffee. I'd say the most, bell rang. I'd probably say the most important one, it would be sugar, that they made the most amount of money. We also had livestock, cows, pigs, and sheep. Again, those are important types of things, and the animals that they brought. So again, some of the social effects, and this is kind of gets you. This is kind of a cool little thing. Makes it real easy for you as actually what went from where to where. And that's pretty much it. I don't think we're going to be talking about witch hunts. That's kind of like a side note. It's kind of a really interesting moment. But that is pretty much it. So hopefully you've understood. Number one, again, hopefully you're looking back at this little corner down here. Number one, how did Europeans have the money, have the strength, and have the know-how to basically explore the world? Number two, who explored, where did they go, and what were the that's probably it. Who are the explorers and where they go? And then the third thing you should probably have known is this: what were the effects on both the Europeans and the American Indians? And based off of this screencast, you should know. So anyways, hope you enjoyed it. Once again, hopefully you're writing down questions, guys. A lot of times students are going, oh, that was awesome, and they move on. Hopefully on this side over here, you're writing down a few questions that you can bring in class, because when you guys bring in questions, that means you guys are listening, you're learning, and we can help out. So bring those questions in, and we'll see you at the next screencast. Take care, guys.